All right, so for this section, we're going to be dealing with radicals or square roots, however you guys want to call them. Now, so what a perfect square is. So I'm thinking of, for example, square root of 144, looking at question number 1. Thinking which number multiplied by itself gives me the number inside of the radical sign. So which number multiplied equals 144? And we're just going to say 12, right? It's a perfect square. Now, what if I cannot think of a whole number that multiplied equals the number on the inside? For example, question number 2. Think of a number multiplied by itself equals 200. No, we can't. If I type it in my calculator, most of them will give me a decimal. So instead, what I want you guys to do, I want you guys to split radical 200. I want you guys to break it into 2 radicals. One of them must be a perfect square. So I'm thinking 2 numbers that multiplied equals 200. One of my 2 numbers must be a perfect square root. All right, so let me see. 100 times 2, that equals 200. Right, I split my radical. So 100 times 2. I said one of them must be a perfect square root because the square root of 100 is 10. So my answer in this case is 10 radical 2. When I ask to simplify, some of your answers might have a radical. I don't want decimals. I want to simplify. All right, how am I going to type the radical sign on the homework? I'm just going to type in the number 10, rad 2. Notice how my 2 was inside the radical. And when I type it, I'm using parentheses for radical. And notice how my 2 is inside the parentheses. Okay, let's take a look at question number 3 now. Thinking 2 numbers that multiplied equals 63. I'm going to break this as 9 times 7. Remember, I said one of them is a perfect square. So square root of 9 is 3. So my answer is 3 radical 7. The way I'm going to type this will be 3 rad 7. Now, what if the number is too big? 320. Then it might take us a few steps. Let's start by thinking 2 numbers that multiplied equals 320. I'm going to think of 16 times 20. Square root of 16 is 4. So that gives me 4 radical 20. Okay. Now my radical 20, remember I said it might take us a few steps. Radical 20 I can do better. I can break that as 4 times 5 because square root of 4 is 2. Now, whole numbers, when I have 2 whole numbers, I must combine them. And I'm going to multiply them. So in this case, I get 8 radical 5. Remember, my radical is still there. I just multiply my whole numbers 4 times 2. How am I going to type this? 8 radical 5. Take a look at number 5. Radical 50. I'm going to break it into 2 radicals. Thinking of 25 times 2. Right? 2 numbers that multiply equals 50. 25 times 2. Square root of 25 is 5. So it became a whole number. I had a whole number on the front to begin with. Multiply them. So we should get 50 radical 2. The way I'm going to type this is 50 rad 2. No spaces altogether. Looking at question number 6. 2 numbers that multiplied equals 63. 9 times 7. The square root of 9 is 3. That's a whole number. I had a whole number on the outside to begin with. Let's multiply them. So I get 18 radical 7. The way I type it is 18 rad 7. All right, not too difficult. Let's take a look at question number 7. 175. Let me break this as 25 times 7. The square root of 25 is 5. Multiply the whole numbers. So that gives me 45 radical 7th. Or 45 rad 7. Let's take a look at question number 8. 600. I can break that as 100 times 6. The square root of 100 is 10. Multiply the whole numbers. So that gives me 20 radical 6. I know radical 6, I can break that as 2 times 3, but neither of them is a perfect square. So my numbers are not going to get smaller. So I just get 20 radical 6. I type this as 20 rad 6. All right, that's simple. Now, there's something we call rationalize denominator. What I mean with that is, if you're given a fraction, make sure your radical is simple as possible, and make sure you have no radicals at the bottom. Right? Make sure everything is simplified, but no radicals at the bottom of the fraction. If you happen to have a radical at the bottom, like our case, I'm going to multiply it top and bottom, in this case by radical 3. I'm going to multiply by the radical that I have at the bottom of my fraction. All right, so let's see what I have. Have a negative sign, so let's not forget about the negative sign. Top of my fraction, let me combine what I have on top of the fraction. I have a 2 and a radical 3. I can multiply a whole number with a whole number or a radical with a radical, but I cannot mix and match. So I just have 2 radical 3 on the top. Now let's see what I have at the bottom. I have a 2 to begin with. Now radical 3 times radical 3, that gives me radical 9. But what's the square root of 9? It's just 3. When you multiply a radical by itself, you just get the number in the inside. Right, you're going to get rid of the radical sign. All right. I could multiply 2 times 3 at the bottom, but instead, I'm going to cancel those 2's, because remember, I'm trying to simplify my fraction. So I have a negative on the front, radical 3 on the top, and 3 at the bottom. Now, how am I going to type that? Let me type the negative sign, radical 3. Now I'm going to do the backslash for over 3. Nice. Let's take a look at question number 10. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical 2. I always multiply by the radical that I have at the bottom. All right, so on top I have radical 6. Notice I combine these two numbers because they are radicals. I can go whole number with a whole number or radical with radical, but do not mix and match. All right, let's see. What do I have at the bottom? I have that 2 to begin with. Radical 2 times radical 2 is just 2. So I get radical 6 over 4. Nothing can simplify. 6 over 4. Remember, that 6 is a radical. That 4 is a whole number, so I cannot combine them. The way I will type this will be, for radical, I'm going to go rad 6 over 4. Let's take a look at question number 11. Let me multiply top and bottom by the radical that I see at the bottom. Now on the top, radical 2 times radical 3, that gives me radical 6. At the bottom, radical 3 times radical 3, that is just 3. The way I'm going to type this, I'm going to go rad 6 over 3. Now in this case, number 12, let me multiply top and bottom by radical 3. I see I have a negative sign. Let's not forget about the negative. On the top, 1 times radical 3. I don't have to put the 1 in front of my radical. I'm just going to write radical 3. At the bottom, let's see, I have that 3 to begin with. Radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. So I'm going to say that I have a negative radical 3 over 9. That way I'm going to type that it will be negative radical 3 over 9. All together, no spaces.